Everyone, hi. Today's a very special day. We finally have a chance to interview Frédéric Bennett. He is an associate art director at IDOS Montreal, and he's also a great friend. We have had a chance to work together there for a few years, notably on the Deus Ex franchise. Fred is now on the art direction side of things, but he actually used to be more on the concept art side of things, and I believe he's been at IDOS Montreal for about 10 years or so. So there is quite a lot to talk about there. I am certainly interested in interviewing Fred as far as how his day-to-day changed since he went over from the concept art to the art direction side of things. And certainly because we both have collaborated on Deus Ex for quite a while there, you can certainly expect us to talk quite liberally about the development of that franchise and certainly the development of the main characters there. So I think it's going to be a very exciting interview. But without further ado, let's introduce Fred and let's get our conversation up and going. Fred, there you are. How's it going, my friend?
Hello, Laura. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
When I heard that you were the one who had to update the design of Jensen, essentially for Mankind Divided, and then again, you've more or less just redid the whole concept practically, but I was really glad, by the way, when I heard that it was you who had that responsibility. Because
Why?
People who don't actually know, well, I think it's worth to just talk about maybe like the history of Jensen very quickly so that people have a good idea there. But first, let's just finish playing the trailer because I think it's a good trailer and I think it's kind of interesting to revisit it once more. Like I haven't looked at this trailer in a while, but every time I look at it, like it still gives me goosebumps and stuff like that. Like it's such an amazing trailer. Like the 5-minute version of this is just so incredible.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps. Like you could tell that art direction wise, the whole team, like we were so into this game. Like it was such a passion project for all of us really. And like, I think that's really what makes the best games and the best art experiences, you know? I watched an interview with Guillermo del Toro, you know? And he's also one of those like directors who's really into his own stuff, you know? And like he told something that like for me now rings true about art and has to ring true about art for art to be good, you know? He said he enjoys movies, he enjoys art when the director gets high off his own supply, you know? And like, I don't quite remember who he was talking about then. He wasn't really talking about his own work, you know, because he is also like a director that's extremely passionate, right? But like, I don't remember in which context he said that, but he said that quote, he said like, you know, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but like good art happens when a director gets high off his own supply, you know? And like, when you watch any Guillermo del Toro movie, that's so obvious, you know, when you watch Pacific Rim, that's so obvious that he's so in love with what he's doing, you know? And I think that, you know, just to bring it back to Deus Ex, you know, that's clearly how we were back then. So all those trailers, especially the 5-minute version of that, like it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so like perhaps I can just talk very briefly about the history of Jensen there, or at least the concept development side of it, and then we can talk about your contribution there for sure, because I think that one is very interesting. But essentially, like on Deus Ex Human Revolution, so the first of the two games that we made, the first of the two Deus Ex games that we've made in Montreal there, the concept art is, so there were a few who had actually worked on Jensen. There's not only one person, but the person that really comes to mind that probably had maybe the biggest contribution as far as the Jensen concept was someone named Jim Murray, I believe. I always confuse him with Bill Murray, unfortunately, and I always have to remember that, but it is Jim Murray. He's like very private. He probably doesn't do a lot of, like certainly doesn't talk or give talks or stuff like that, but he's such an amazing artist. And,
I have to say, jump in there quickly, Laura.
Go for it.
When I joined Behavior, he had just left for IDOS. So when when I signed my contract to go to IDOS, I was all excited because I'd be working with Jim Murray. He was like a legend for me. And when first thing I learned when I joined IDOS is that he had just left. So it's like I'm chasing the guy. I have never met him. He's in Seattle, I think now for
Valve,
thank you. I never met the guy, but I still look at his stuff
Such a humble guy. Such a great guy.
Sorry,
no. I mean, that's what you're here for. So please do it more. That guy was such a great guy. Yeah, like, so, you know, I had a chance to work with this guy for like a few years, and like he was also, I wouldn't necessarily call him a mentor because he was more on the concept art side, but he really opened my eyes to character art being art, you know, because before then I considered myself to be a character modeler, you know, someone who would model. So I was more on the technical side of things. And Jim Murray and certainly the whole art direction team back at Eidos Montreal had a huge, really shifted my perspective to like, no, like we make art, like art is more important than just the technical side of making characters down. And when he left the studio, you know, if I just bring him, let's say Adam Jensen, early concept, he had a very distinct visual style, amazing visual style. And when I heard that he had left the studio, there you go, yeah. When I heard he left the studio, I was like, oh my god, like this is not good, you know, like it's like we're losing like a monument, and you know, so this is essentially the concept that he had done, you know, and I was really scared for the sequel, you know, because yes, we certainly had other people on staff that were great, but Jim just had that very special like style and just taste, and like everything he did was just so incredibly artistically like great.
He was a comic book guy, so there was always a lot of expression, exaggeration in his proportions, and like this concept there, the characters stretched very thin, very elegant. That's something that, you know, only Jim does.
Yeah. And that was certainly part of the earlier art direction as far as the game was concerned, yeah. And then there was a shift of art direction sort of midway to make it a bit more realistic, these sorts of things. And perhaps this is just funny to say, but I remember getting the concept here, like, of like the arms. Fortunately, this is a bit low res, so even if I zoom in, it's still going to look a bit blurry there. But I remember getting the concept for this, and like I started modeling this out, and there was a time when Jim, like I spoke to him in the cafeteria. The guy is so incredibly humble. I just randomly crossed him in the cafeteria of Eidos Montreal, and he was like, okay, so you started making the arms of Jensen. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, are you figuring it out? Like, is it fine? Is the concept fine? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. And he was like, oh, thank God. You know, like he was so incredibly stressed out that his work wasn't going to be good enough, or the concept wasn't going to be like evocative enough or something like that. Like he was so incredibly humble there, but it's like, of course, like this is like a dream come true, like having to work from a concept like this, right? Anyway, so, you know, he was quite a legend. He left the studio to go to Valve, and then Mankind Divided came around, and then you came around, essentially. And then I heard that you were essentially going to do the concept for Jensen for Mankind Divided, and I was like, thank God, like, because I just looked at your art, and somehow I really saw, I don't know whether there is a direct influence or not, but yes. I just saw the art that you were doing, and I'm like, this is almost Jim Murray's art, you know, like this is as good as what Jim Murray was like doing, you know, perhaps a bit more on the realistic side of things, but then at that point Deus Ex also was, you know, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So when I saw the concepts that you were actually doing, and when I heard that you were going to concept Jensen,
even the background color, I tried using the same kind of palettes than Jim was using. That beige. Right.
Yeah. So like, what was the process then to like take like something that essentially a monument had worked before you, and now it's like, hey Fred, now you have the responsibility of redesigning the whole character. Like, how do you go about doing something like that? Like, how do you follow up that?
I remember first that it took a long time, and when I say long time, I think I would say it was, all in all, it was about maybe 6 months or something. So obviously it's not 6 months of working on that concept art every day, but it's, you know, you do a first pass and then it gets reviewed by some people back 2 weeks later. So you second pass, and it's a lot of back and forth call it ping pong. You know, it's like a tennis game, kind of. You do little compromises here and there because of gameplay, because of animation. You know, you get a lot of comments from the other directors, like of animation or director of, I don't know, gameplay, that says like he has to have, I don't know, access to all his weapons, or he has to be protected from, you know, bullets or whatever. So it's a very organic process. It's not just, you know, the concept art. It's being in a bubble and just spitting out a cool concept. Has to reflect the needs of various people on the team. So that's why it takes a long time, especially a main character like this. It doesn't, you know, happen from one day to the next. That being said, I would say it was quite a smooth experience. I remember working on Jensen, was not feeling that, you know, I don't remember feeling pressure, or I just remember having fun. Might sound funny to say now, but I was only starting using photo bashing at the time. Before that, I would paint everything. So when I did Jensen, I remember, you know, tried and expanding my references to not just think like what's usually when you're a junior concept artist, you have to design a new character. I don't know, like in the case of Jensen, like a military inspired character. You're gonna Google army stuff, you know, for references. But at that point, I was just discovering that you can try and get inspiration from things that have nothing to do with what you're about to do. So I remember starting and looking at motorcycle engines. I was doing my motorcycle class at that time, passing the license. So I was really into motorcycles. I was like looking at all these little parts and pieces on the engine of my bike, and I had an old bike, so it wasn't really cool, but I was starting to, you know, be inspired by, you know, more fancier bikes around, like Ducatis and stuff that have really well crafted, well designed engines. So I just started using pieces of engine like this on his body. The first version, it was covered with like harder shell. I have it somewhere in the Photoshop document on my computer. It didn't pass because somebody from the animation that he couldn't bend, you know, he had to bend to pick up, you know, ammo and whatnot. So first thing I had to do, make sure that the hard shell was, you know, only protecting the vital organs, so the lungs and the heart, and then the rest would be softer material like Kevlar. So that's why the rest of the body is a lot more simple, but the concentration of details is on his chest there. Of course, when you work on this stuff, you make up your own stories. So in my mind, this little thing that he has on chest was to prevent from being crushed by somebody who would have more powerful augmentations. I was thinking, like, in the future, if he has like very powerful arms, that means surely somebody else somewhere stronger arms, or maybe a machine that can fight him. So he needs something that all these plates are like, you know, little like tectonic plates that can kind of, I don't know, squeeze into each other, and at some point they just lock, and no amount of pressure can destroy this thing. So that's what I was thinking about when I designed this.
Yeah,
I think it's the first time I talk about this, by the way.
I think it's very on point because you know, like, I'm trying to bring up a picture here, like if I can get that trailer again, HR trailer. You know, because like actually in Human Revolution, there's essentially a character called Barrett. Yeah. And he is essentially exactly what you've described, right? Like, he's essentially
exactly
stronger than Jensen is. Like in the trailer of Human Revolution, you even see him essentially at some point grab Jensen and try to crush him with his hand. You know,
exactly.
So like, it's such a great.
Maybe like, what I had in mind, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, like, unconsciously there must have been something like that here.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can actually bring it up here, because it's such a great shot. little part of it. There we go, right there, right. It's like, boom, just grab him with the arm, try to crush him, you know? Yeah, like that actually makes a lot of sense, because I do remember when we were actually working on the production, when I saw the concept of Jensen for Mankind Divided for the first time, I remember that we had actually had this discussion about this whole armor being there so that he can't get crushed, you know? And I remember asking you about the whole collar and everything that was sort of happening there, and you were like, yeah, it's so that he doesn't break his neck, you know, and that like he can't get his neck snapped and like stuff like that, you know, like so there's all this thinking that goes behind the concept that I think is really fascinating, like left and right, you know, like it's really about like you've really put forward the functional side of it, you know, like let's make something, not only is it just pretty, but it's also functional, you know, like you've really thought all of that through, and I think that's really fantastic there.
And most of the time, I think your concept has to speak for itself. So when you show like the concept, people have to, at least your art director has to like it without you trying to explain, you know, justify. But in Jensen's case, when I would like show the concept, but also tell my art director all these ideas that I just mentioned, it would really help to sell the like that little orange strap that he for me was like what I was thinking about was, okay, so you live in a society where a lot of people have augmentations. What's a good way to fight these people if you don't have augmentation? Well, it would be acid, maybe battery acid, instantly damage the electronics in those augmentations. So I had this scene from Aliens where one of the xenomorphs explodes and all the acid gets stuck in the dude's armor. The first thing that he does is take off the armor. So in my mind, Jensen needed at least one way to quickly like pull a strap or something so that whole thing falls apart in case he was to get some acid in there. So a lot of little ideas like this that I would mention to my art director and that would really help to sell the concept. In the end, it's not in the game anywhere. We're not, you know, talking about acid or being crushed or anything like that. But in my mind, it just makes the world a little more, gives a little more depth, a little more livable. Can you say that? Anyways.
Yeah, for sure. You know,
a little more rich. You know?
Yeah, I think it's these details that bring someone like me to watch the same movie like 12 times. You know, like of course we're speaking about a video game, but like when people put a lot of effort, when they really take their craft seriously, when they're really in love with what they're actually doing, you can usually tell because all these little details are all there. They're all sort of thought through, you know? It's like ultimately, if that little strap wasn't there, people like it would not have changed anything at all as far as the game's concerned. But there is a story there. There is a reason for it. And like also like people will also sort of look at that and sort of think themselves through, you know, like it could be like, this is just the strap he pulls on when he goes back home and he wants to just, I don't know, like after like a hard day's work, he's like,
take a shower.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, he's got to remove his stuff somehow, right? So like people are also free to just make up the stories that they want, sort of thing, you know. But there is essentially a reason that is there, and like it's all these little details I think that really like ultimately make a character very iconic, very special, very memorable, and that really sort of sticks around and isn't just yet another main character that you've seen, just like every other game that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the whole process essentially, say, took about 6 months to develop Jensen, essentially?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I remember like usually it's very hard to develop a main character for a game. And since you were more on the art direction side, I'd like to know also like if you have other experiences there that is maybe interesting to talk about, of course, without ever revealing anything that you're not supposed to. But like I also remember that Jensen was actually a very smooth experience. It's like I saw this concept and I was like, that's it. It's like the concept is done. It's like go and model it, you know. But like usually, like most games I've worked on, and I remember also Thief, especially at Eidos Montreal, had been the development of the main character there had taken forever. Like and there were so many versions that were done, you know. But somehow it's like you did this concept once and that's it. It's like you had nailed it like the first time. Or at least that's kind of what it felt like, you know. Maybe that speaks simply to your skills, but yeah. But like in general, it's not that easy, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. And it keeps changing until almost like the day before the game is shipped, right? Especially for you guys. Like I remember we had modifications on the actual model until the very end of the project. Am I right?
Yeah, but it was always a slightly minor. Like ultimately, the modeling side too. It's like I modeled it once and that's it.
Okay.
It's like I made the model once, like, and pretty much like everything that sort of we had to do afterward, we had to adjust proportions a little bit. There were some proportional issues that we had to fix because of the rig, and there were like the rigging had always been very complicated because of the history of Deus Ex there. Because Deus Ex started off as a very stylized game essentially in the beginning, and it sort of like very gradually morphed into something that was a lot more realistic there, like through time, through like trying stuff out, right? But like there's if you guys actually go through it and look at like the models that we had for Human Revolution there, you'll see that the models are actually way more stylized in terms of proportions.
Yeah, I remember the big shoulders and
yeah. Just like this here. It's like huge shoulders, these sorts of things. You know?
Small head, yeah.
Yeah. And these proportions sort of followed us because of the rigging, essentially. We couldn't redo all the animations for the sequel, you know, so there was a lot of reuse that had to happen as far as the animation is concerned and all that stuff there. So we kind of fought the proportions that we had set, like even like at that point, almost 10 years before. Because of technical reasons, we were essentially fighting those proportions until the end and trying to make the best that we could with the rig that we had, trying to get the proportions to be as realistic as they could. But there were always like little tweaks that we had to do, and we had to sort of tweak the size of things. A lot of things like this part too, like which we've just talked about, which was really cool from a design standpoint. A lot of these details we had to slim them down with time. We had to slim them down because they would create problems when the arms would actually move around. There would be a lot of interpenetrations between this whole thing and the arms themselves, you know, because like we could fix some of that through skinning, but then again, if you make the whole rigid piece that he's got on his chest a little too flexible, then it doesn't really look like armor anymore. Yeah. So there was like quite a lot there that were challenges that are constant challenges on productions, these sorts of things, you know. So we tweak proportions, we tweak stuff, you know, like this is super flat for the same reasons too, you know, like this started off as bulging out quite a lot more, but we had to flatten stuff out of time. Those are the kind of things that we had to fight until the end.
So what's your reaction when you first saw the new concept? Did you already know that the proportions would be different from the first game, or was it like a surprise? I don't remember in the timeline of how this happened.
It's a very gradual process, you know, like the biggest shift really happened at midpoint of Human Revolution's development, when we really went from that very stylized approach to a very more realistic approach, you know. That's when the shift sort of happened. And to be honest, when we finished Human Revolution and we were starting Mankind Divided, probably just right before you joined us, I think it was also clear for everyone on the 3D side that we wanted to do stuff that was more realistic. We always wanted to keep a bit of that stylization in there because it's very important. I don't think anyone from the art direction, certainly not from the but certainly all the way down to like 3D character art. We knew we wanted to make something that still had a stylized touch too, of course, but a lot more realistic, you know. So yeah, I was expecting something more realistic in terms of proportion. I was happy that we got that too. So I wouldn't say there were any surprises, but as I said, the whole development there.
But you didn't reuse anything from the previous game to work on this?
No, everything was redone. Everything was like
from scratch?
Everything was redone from scratch, the whole arms, which is actually funny for those who do 3D art who like listen to this, because the Human Revolution version of Adam Jensen's arms were all modeled using polygons. And then for the sequel, for Mankind Divided, I redid everything within ZBrush there. So all of this is all ZBrush there. But yeah, so the whole process got, the whole character got redone from scratch, including the head too. So we pretty much scrapped Jensen and started completely new.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's more than just Jensen that's also interesting to talk about as far as Deus Ex is concerned and Deus Ex's development is concerned. One of my favorite characters is this guy here. So Vaclav, Koller, and like if you play Mankind Divided, I think he really sticks out. Like he's a character that's so funny, so like interesting. Like he's such a, you know, like the whole game is very serious. It's very brooding, right? And then you got this guy that just comes into portrait once in a while. He's almost like the comic relief. But I can imagine that it also came with a whole lot of different challenges. And also, like, I think there's a lot of the personality's character that's very visible through his design there. So could you talk a little bit about that? Like the whole development of the concept for this guy?
Yeah, of course. So first thing I have to say, a little disclaimer there, is that I think back in the days, one of my opposite of a skill, like a défaut. What's the word I'm looking for?
I say default, and that's not it either.
Default. I don't think
a weakness.
A weakness. There you go. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
Damn French.
So I think one of my weaknesses that was a little irritating from my art director was that I would tend to, when the story people would describe a new character that I had to work on, I would tend to have instantly like a image like popping in my mind, and I would stick to it. And I remember Vaclav being a prime example of this, that it happened like instantly. Like this guy was telling me, okay, the scientist, he likes punk music, he's from Eastern Europe, has these augmentations. So, and I think it was like just, you know, being an antenna and catching like concept art that was already floating in the air. It was already there. I catched it, I caught it, and I would like instantly go into detail, and you know, after 5 days or something, would show this to my art director. It would be like, pretty nice, but we have other iterations of this. Do you have like version B, version C? I'd be like, nope, this is it. So I think like it would always create this bit of a awkward scene, because my art director he couldn't deny that he kind of liked what I had done, but at the same time I think he was maybe a bit irritated because I hadn't explored other avenues. So that's the first thing I wanted to say, is that I don't think I did any other true variations of this character. I think it was pretty much this from day one. So that being said, I remember that, I don't know if it's because we had a chat or something, but I remember the name of Jay Baruchel, he's actually from Montreal as well.
Yeah.
I remember his name popping up, maybe just in my mind or from the story guy, I can't remember, but I remember his, personality was kind of a good inspiration to start with in his face. So
definitely,
without trying to mimic his face directly, I definitely it's undeniable that I kind of did a comic book version of this guy, kind of like my version of Jay Baruchel in the Deus Ex world. I remember Jack White also from the White Stripes, that because he was supposed to be like this guy who smokes a lot of weed and takes other non-mentioned substances. So how there's I don't know if Jack White takes drugs. I have no clue, but he has the face of a guy that enjoys some enjoys little pleasures in life. Yeah. Yes. And the way he has like a little bit of bluer skin around his eyes, and the white of his eyeballs is always a little red. Funny thing is, I wear contacts. A lot of people think I smoke weed because at the end of the day my eyes are itchy, but I don't even smoke weed. So Jack White, Jay Baruchel together were kind of the inspiration. If you zoom in, you'll see that around his eyes, puffy red eyes.
It's super red.
Yeah, he clearly just had a big joint there. But I remember the hair being the tricky thing. We went through a lot of hairdos, and none of them were quite convincing. And it's Bruno. You remember Bruno, another concept artist, who said, "Why don't you just give him your hair?" Because at that time, hard to imagine now. I've lost the % of my hair since. At that time, I had a big buffy. This is a self-portrait of me back then. So that's basically what I did. I took a picture of my hair and kind of stylized it and up, and that's it. That was basically the process for Vaclav.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with the lab coat, with the patches, the rock band patches, that was kind of, or just popped in my mind. I thought it was a cool idea. I no doubt if I were to redo this character today, it would be completely different. I would be, giving my art director a lot more options to play with. I don't know, different arms. I don't especially like the design that I did with the arms. Maybe the 3-fingered hand is kind of, it's a concept art is often a lot about silhouettes. So if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see the weird hand, but the other one just looks like sort of, sweater or something. Doesn't really stand out. Not particularly proud of some of the design choices there, but in the end, like you say, I think the character was fun because also of the acting from the actor Vaclav, and also of course the dialogue and music and all these elements. When they come together, they bring life to the characters.
There's one thing you said to me. I don't know if you remember saying it, but there's one thing that you said to me and it was very interesting. You said something along the lines of, he's a super tiny character and he's super minuscule and stuff. And I've heard the voice actor who's going to voice it, and it's this super deep voice,
Deep voice,
and it's such a huge disconnect. But at the same time, you were like, it works so well, like that. Yeah. It's like,
I think we're all surprised the first time we heard the voice actor's voice, very deep voice. But I kind of like these contrasts. I think
yeah. I think it works.
Helps making him more memorable.
Yeah. I think I've always wondered what this was for. I'm like, is this to light the joint that he smokes? Is that did he get himself a lighter on his hand just to smoke some?
So the official reason is to weld stuff.
Right. Yeah.
He builds robotic arms and stuff. But I like you. I like your option.
Yeah. He looks like the kind of guy who would find creative uses for everything that he has.
Absolutely.
There's also something that you said at some point that I don't know if you remember or not. I suppose I just have a good memory for these things. But at some point you said something that his design was purposefully imbalanced, And I always kind of when I heard that, I was like, that is so true, because often we tell people, okay, essentially what you said about Jensen read before, which was, okay, there's more details around the upper portion of the body, so we tend to do this kind of detail contrast where there's more details in the zones of the character that you want to draw attention to, these sorts of things, which for main characters is often closer to the face there in that particular zone, and so you have a good balance of detail like that when you sort of have zones of the character that are more at rest when there's less detail, and you have zones of the character that have more detail because they're points of focus, And then I remember looking at this after I heard you say that, and I was like, that is so true. He's unbalanced because this is super detailed. This is super detailed. There's details everywhere. It practically becomes noise, but it's such in line with the personality of the character that it really feels to me like you've really captured, whether that's conscious or not, you've really captured the personality of the character through the amount of detail and the detail balance that you have everywhere on the character there. So I thought that was a genius, personally.
Thank you. Like I said, I don't remember everything because it's been a while, but I might have said that, and I hope I meant it and was telling the truth. One detail that I like that I forgot that I just remembered by looking at it is zoom in the armpit and enjoy how yellow and disgusting that area is.
Yeah, take a look at that. I had some fun with the 3D model to make that happen too, by the way.
Yeah, you did it, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm like, of course, like of course we need that in there. We need some of that good yellow stuff.
He doesn't have the best hygiene.
Yeah, take a look. I even took it like a bit of a step further.
Yeah.
Like, let's just slap all the details left and right on him. Like let's make him very unbalanced. Yeah, that was really, really cool.
Oh, it's good to see him. To see the 3D model again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, those fake band like that rock band in the back. I did a lot of these fake bands, fake posters, or a lot of them were just like parody versions of existing bands. I remember I did a lot of Metallica and Motorhead, Soundgarden, a lot of my parody versions of these bands. There were spread around the game, like there was a music store somewhere with vinyls and CDs. Anyways, that was fun to do.
I do remember some of these didn't go through legal too, and we had to change some of these later on because they were too close to the real bands that it's like a legal sort of got involved. Like, no, it's like you need to make these more different,
Yeah.
I do remember, so like a few of these like actually changed, like some of these here, if you guys actually take a look between the 3D model, or rather the 2D concept and the 3D one, like some of these suits, like, oh shit, we need to change this. And so like...
It's true, that's something we always forget, but everything goes through legal at the end. It's often late in the process. So sometimes a character or some concept art, something you did like year, 2 year, even 3 years in the past, somebody comes back to you.
All right. I want to move on. So talking about Deus Ex is very interesting, and I'm sure we could spend the whole day here talking about it. And I think at some point I'll even have to re-invite you again to talk even more about some of these concepts there. And guys, if you want to ask questions as far as Deus Ex is concerned for the Q&A, of course, please go ahead and do that. But essentially, I also want to give people a bit of a taste for the kind of job that you do and the sort of interactions between the 2D concept side, the art direction side of production, the people who do 3D art, these sorts of things, So let's shift towards that particular topic a little bit there, Perhaps there you can start us off by just telling us a little bit about like what does the day-to-day look like for someone who does art direction?
So it's a lot of reviews. Mostly, I would say like 75% of the time is reviewing stuff. In my case, I also have artists that are in Japan or outsourcers that are elsewhere in the world. So that means when I wake up in the morning, I get to my computer around 9 or something like that. I already have stuff that's coming during the night because of, time zones. So people in Japan have just finished their day. Just are going to sleep when I start my day, kind of. So sometimes I already have stuff to see there. So reviews, meetings, it's a completely different job than being a concept artist. Being a concept artist meant that I was really in a bubble most part of the day. I would say most part of the year, actually. We're in this like isolated section of the studio amongst ourselves, not really aware of all the stuff that's going on with the rest of the team on the project. I mean, you and me, we would talk together because we had to review, like, I was kind of sometimes doing reviews directly with you, not necessarily with the art director. That's fun because when you're a concept artist, you have like a bit of ownership of your, you feel like you have a bit of ownership of your character, and I hope you do as well on your model.
Oh, for sure. There's so much stuff that you haven't done well, and I have to go back over and I have to tweak. It's like, oh, this brush stroke that he did. What do I do with this? Well, I guess it's a detail that, I'm just joking there, but
No, but that reminds me something, Laura. One day you came to me and you know what I'm gonna say? You said what's under Jensen's boots? What's on the sole? And I was like, I don't know. I'll get back to you. So like 30 minutes later or an hour later, I got back to you, and that was funny because I was gonna hide some bright color under Jensen because he's basically a black, very dark gray black character. So I said, I'm gonna hide a little orange line. I'm putting on the mic. Orange line for a reason.
You can see it here too.
To be cool. Thinking nobody would ever see this. Only you would know. Do you remember what's the first frame of the CG trailer? The announcement trailer? I think it's like the first frame or something. Go back to the very beginning of the trailer. You see him running. Cameras. There you go.
There we go.
Ground level.
There you go. That damn strip.
We never thought, not in a million years, that we would see Jensen's soul anywhere in the game, especially not in the announcement trailer. That's a funny story, I think.
But it was also a call back to the strap that he has here, right? It's like
probably
everything
same
comes
color,
together in the end. Yeah.